This is a show about facing fear, unlocking courage, and taking action.
Courage isn't necessarily a daunting thing.
It's going to give you more purpose. It's going to give you more drive.
It feels like making a courageous decision is going to get you closer to who you aspire to be.
It's knowledge plus faith plus action equals courage.
If you don't have the discipline, I'm going to say the courage, to upset, to piss off 93% of a market, you're never going to do well. Being a pleaser, which a lot of entrepreneurs are, they were the pleaser in the family. You have to have the courage to take a stand in your market.
I'm giddy today. That is the appropriate word. Because I think the word thought leader gets thrown around a lot, and I'm not totally sold that I buy that. I don't think anyone sees themselves. We're just in the work and doing it. But when I think about the work you've done, I was blown away by the book. When I was trying to figure out my own style, Verne, you read every book you can read because like, what's my style? I've never written a book before. How do you do that? And I remember honestly feeling short-circuited from your book in all the right ways. And so I don't think I would throw that term thought leader around, but you are a thought leader. Thank you for inspiring me with the work that we do here. I do say, just to give you some love, you're not just a thought leader, though. You're also a do leader. I think thought leadership is nothing without do leadership. And I think do leadership does nothing without feel leadership. And when I see the work that you've put into play, it has so helped me with take the leap with courage. So just want to, again, mad props to you on what you've built. I know you're in the States right now, yes?
I am. Yeah, I'm in Boulder until I get formally moved back to Barcelona next week.
Okay, so give me you're like kind of like Carmen Sandiego, like where in the world is Verne Harnish? Like, give me the leaps. Like, how are you full-time in Barcelona?
I am. Yes. Yeah. And lived on and off there for the last 15 years. And 3 of my 4 children are in Barcelona. So my epicenter, my world is there.
Yeah. And so for those of you who are just listening, Verne, his little label is Verne Harnish, father of 4, which is, I'm assuming you mean 4 children, not 4 companies, right? But you're back here in the States right now. How long are you in the States for?
I'm on and off because there's so many gigs here, Ryan. I'm on and off all year.
The book I was referring to, folks, if you hadn't heard or hadn't read it yet, the one for me that landed was Scaling Up, How a Few Companies Make It and Why the Rest Don't. Just a great read. Verne, one of my favorite quotes that you have is routine sets you free. And does that still hold for you?
It does. And it was interesting. The podcast I was just on, the guy's German, and he was just on the Autobahn. And what's interesting is, the Autobahn gives you unbelievable freedom to go at speeds that you could never imagine in the United States. Yet what's interesting is the safety record. There's considerably less deaths on the Autobahn than there are on the highways in the United States. And a big part of that is because 2 things. One, you stay within the white lines, and it wouldn't be a sport if there weren't white lines or boundaries. I mean, it wouldn't even be fun if there weren't. And number 2, everybody really follows the rules. Nobody drives in the fast, slow in the fast lane like they do in our country, which drives me crazy. People use their signals, and it's these rules, these routines, these white lines that actually set you free and let you go faster. And so that's really, I think, the analogy that jumped out to me this morning.
When you see a business or you're working with a leader,
yeah,
how do you help them decide what's I'm air quoting, a law, a rule? Like, how do you help them define what a rule could be in their business?
Yeah. It's a great question. And if you look at our vision summary, which is kind of our 1-page summary of our bigger 1-page strategic plan, you're going to see that the left and right sides are bounded by the brand promises and the core values. The brand promises are the white lines. Those are the things that you want nobody to cross. So, for instance, we have a client in the Philippines. They are in the ferry business, and the Philippines actually, Ryan, has killed more people in ferry accidents than all other countries combined. Now, part of it's because they have 7,000 islands. People don't
Okay.
realize that there's 7,000 islands that make up the Philippines. So this family, this prominent shipping family, jumped in about 12 years ago and said, let's fix this for our country. And what I love is on the side of the ferry are the three brand promises. We promise you to be very safe, very fast, and very convenient. And those are the white lines. So the first thing we do is we help a company understand what is the job to be done? What's the three things that customers need you to promise? And we know that if you communicate a measurable promise, your brand is much more powerful and valuable. That was reinforced by research shared in Harvard Business Review earlier this year. And the word is, I don't care what you do, tens of thousands of employees. Now they've got thousands. They started with one ship. Now they got close to 30 ferries. But whatever you do, it's got to be safe first. It's got to be fast, and you can't sacrifice convenience. Everything else, is up for grabs. So that's the first thing we help them do. The second is the rules of your game. And that's where the core values come in. And as Jim Collins rightfully said, it's not a wish list. It is a discovery exercise. And they are what they are. And you don't have to agree with them, but if you don't want to play by our rules, then go someplace else. And what's interesting is if you're going to play soccer, football, I don't care what the culture is, what the country is, everybody plays by the same rules. And what I love is that there are referees. And if you're not giving out yellow cards and every once in a while a red card, then no one's going to take your rules seriously. And by the way, who wants to play a game that doesn't have rules and aren't being fairly followed? Nobody wants that game. And so we help companies figure out their brand promises and their core values, and they've got to be right. There are right and wrong answers.
Yeah. Look, I am a crazy person on values, and I'm sure I've been inspired by your work. I can't imagine that I haven't, but I always say core values are not eye rolls or how the exceptional roll. And when you walk into a culture, if I'm on day 2 and I haven't figured out yet what are the I'm air quoting the rules of the culture, it starts with the values and how unique the values are, and have they been prioritized or not. So
By the way, that's where leaders need to be more courageous. They need to call people out on rule violations like we do in sport.
Yeah.
And it's the thing that gets spectators upset the most and the other employees is if you're not calling people out for violating what are the core values. And it starts with yourself, making sure that you're living them. And then there's nothing more demoralizing to employees is to see other employees doing damage to the brand, internally or externally. And so you as leaders have got to make the tough decisions and call people out.
Well, just to keep the soccer metaphor going, for leaders that are listening, sometimes you're the manager of the club, you're the coach here, and sometimes you're the zebra. Like sometimes you're the one giving out the cards, and you kind of have to toggle between both of those worlds. It's funny. I have definitely said you've got routine sets you free. I've definitely said courage sets you free. And the companies are stuck or scared or stale or safe. That courage is the essential ingredient. But I kind of want to get your take before you get too stained by the work we do over here. Like, what's your thought on that?
Well, the other place that I think real courage is needed, and again, as you know, I've mentioned 40 other books in my book. First of all, I hardly have all the answers. If anything, we've done a good job of kind of sifting what's the best of the Fortune 500 and interpreting that for us mere mortals on what we could do to scale our companies. And that's where I've got to turn to Dr. Frances Frey at Harvard and her book, Uncommon Service. And we have what's called the 770 rule, which says that you really don't want more than 7% of a big market. Look, Starbucks only has 4% of all the coffee consumed in the United States. If you look at any significant brand, they barely have single, if not double digits. But you want to own 70% of a niche. What does that mean? And Frances Fry says it in her language. If you don't have the discipline, I'm going to say the courage, to upset, to piss off 93% of a market, you're never going to do well. And look, being a pleaser, which a lot of entrepreneurs are, they were the pleaser in the family. They were the one trying to get everybody to get along. Hey, that's a really useful skill when you launch a company. We want to please people. But if you're trying to please everybody all the time, you're going to end up being a commodity. And so you have to have the courage to take a stand, a position in your market. And you've got to be willing to say no when customers keep asking for things. Because if you don't, customers will want you to bankruptcy. Want. By the way, they want more. They want to pay less.
Of course.
And there is the train wreck that crushes a lot of companies. And your employees want you to have the courage and the conviction to first define and then stick to the game that we've chosen to play.
Do you see a difference between leaders at public companies versus private companies on how they can have the courage to say no? Like my one of my mentors says this two most underutilized words in business are courage and no.
Right.
So, right. And so do you see a difference between when you work with private sector leaders versus public leaders? A difference on how much courage or their ability to say no?
The great leaders of both have the courage to say no. The less great leaders of both have less courage to say no. So I don't see a difference. But I also don't work that much with public company CEOs. So I don't have as much visibility. Well, I will say this. We do know that, and it's a constant conversation in the daily brief that Fortune puts out, Fortune magazine. It's one of the free daily briefs that I encourage every entrepreneur to get. Fortune really does a great job of going deep in topics that are helpful to us as leaders. And there is a lot of pressure when you're a public company to be careful what you say, because man, you can plummet the stock. We saw what happened to Bud Light in the United States. And so, but it can happen just as easy with a private company in their own market space. I've made the mistake in my own weekly insights of speaking out about some political issue. I will never do that again. People are not reading my blog to get my political opinion. They're reading it to get my business opinion. Now, if there's a political decision that I think affects business, I'll report on it. But for me to take a stance, I can do that in other places, but not as the CEO of Scaling Up.
Talk to me about a company that's like, they feel like they're ready to scale up. Okay, they're not there yet, but they kind of feel the snowball is growing, and like, don't let the snowball melt, right? When you look at a company like that, and you're going to give them like a gold medal insight, a silver medal insight, and a bronze insight, okay, on like, hey, before you hit the gas, make sure you're ready for X, Y, and Z. Like, what would you say to that company before they really hit the gas on scaling up?
Yeah. Well, the gold is, the late Andy Grove at Intel, who said more companies died from indigestion than starvation. And so you've got, number one, you've got to be careful you're not going to grow broke, because growth sucks cash. And if you don't have your cash model figured out in your business model, that's why we have a tool called the cash flow story. That is something that all of our coaching partners use diligently with our clients. If you don't have that right, growth will crush you. So you've got to have your systems and processes and your cash flow in order. That's the gold standard. The silver is, I think, making sure that you don't stray from what got you here, that you don't sacrifice the soul of the business in the process. And that's what I really think founder mode is about, is understand it's this term that's been spinning around Silicon Valley the last few weeks by Paul Graham at Y Combinator. And I think what that means is for you to be super clear what is the soul of the business and to remain maniacal about that, but then being willing to delegate everything else. If you continue to hold on to everything as you scale, you're gonna crush not only everybody else, but the soul of the business as well. So that really is the silver. And the bronze, what would be my third? It is really critical to have the daily huddle. If you want to move fast, you've got to communicate. And by the way, that's why it's the first thing that Steve Jobs did when he took over Apple. He identified the 5, not the 50 or 500, the 5 that were going to build the computer that was going to turn the company around. And he put them in his conference room and they met every day. The first thing Brian Chesky, Nate, and his other co-founder did when they lost $1 billion worth of bookings on that Friday the 13th in the pandemic is they said, we're going to meet daily 7 days a week, not just 5 days a week. So I'm getting ready to do a webinar this afternoon on the 5 C's of managing in a crisis. And the very first one is you've got to be on top of your communication with your team daily. So those what I'd call the gold, silver, and bronze.
Got it. Yeah. Careful of growing broke, right? Discipline there. Founder mode, and then daily huddle. It's funny when you talked about like your C's, because I have C's too. Like if you would have said, I could have called my company Clarity. I mean, I don't think that's ownable, but like really being in the courageous business, we're in the clarity business. Like you just can't be courageous on a cloudy night. Good luck, right? Can't see the North Star on a cloudy night. So, but I'm curious for you, and curiosity is another good C, by the way.
Yeah,
I'm curious, where does creativity play for you? Like, how does that play in your world? Because I think I don't see myself, I've said this before in the pod, I don't see myself as a business guy.
Yeah.
I don't see myself as a creative guy. I'm a creative business guy.
Yeah.
I like process because it gives me like where the lines are on where I can play and where I can't. But I love creativity and how that helps people feel. Where does creativity play in all this for you?
There's a formula. So I imagine there's a lot of business owners that are listening to this, who, by the way, might also be the CEO. Those are 2 different hats. And the number one job of the owner, Ryan, is to drive or scale valuation. That is our number one job. Our first decision then, who should be CEO. And some of you need to fire yourself and just be owner. But here's the sequence. So your job's to drive valuation. The number one driver of valuation is pricing power. And the number one driver of pricing power is innovation, of which creativity is a piece of. The key is that you only need 1. You don't need 100. And if you don't pick the right one, then what you're going to end up doing is wasting a lot of money. Often creativity and innovation just means screw up the system, right? And it's one of the reasons why it's hard to let employees be wildly creative, because we can end up having the insane running the asylum. And we end up with 100 different initiatives that do nothing but mess things up for the customer. So that's what's critical, is for you to understand the job to be done. And so I'll give you an example. Let's take Elon Musk. And I hope everyone listening has read Walter Isaacson's biography of Elon Musk. I'm going through it for a 4th time. There's such wisdom in it. Whatever you believe about him as a person and his number of wives and children and all that, you can set that aside. But he's the only guy since Wayne Huizenga, the late Wayne Huizenga, that's founded and scaled several multi-billion-dollar plus public companies. So let's just take SpaceX. What was the critical innovation that If they had not figured this out, nothing else matters. And it's clearly the reusable rocket. I mean, you could be creative 100 other ways. If you don't figure out how to reuse a rocket, you're not going to scale our ability to go to space. And when they did and landed all 3 boosters of the Falcon in 2019, in the next 5 years, they put more people and stuff in space than all countries combined in the last 50 years. And here's the key: for 1/30th the cost, not 30% less, 1/30th the cost. So first, you just need one innovation. By the way, Costco only had one innovation. Jim Senegal only had one innovation. And that was what? The membership fee. By the way, that membership fee generates the 73% of their 6.2 billion in profit. Amazon only had one innovation, and that was the one click. They even trademarked it and all that stuff. Now, they had a second one about 5 years later, which was, let's copy Jim Senegal. Let's have a membership fee. So we addressed the real constraint. But as Warren Buffett said, he's probably only made a dozen good decisions over 50 years. That's about one every 5 years. So, and then what you need is a lot of continuous improvement. And that's where you need a lot of kind of 1% creative moves every week. And there, just to finish out the analogy, the workhorse for SpaceX is called the Raptor engine. That was $2 million. Their next iteration, Raptor 2, was $1 million. They cut the price in half. And the third iteration, which just came out, is somewhere rumored to be less than $500,000, closer to maybe $250,000. So they took their workhorse engine and reduced it by almost a factor of 8 in terms of cost. And that 1% improvement every week, compound interest is your friend. So you need one big innovation and a lot of little ones. And that requires creativity in order to be able to do that.
Well, it's also wild when you put it in the perspective of like 5 real big good ideas in a lifetime of and like household brand name, and then just continual improvement. Vern, it's like so obvious for me sitting here to appreciate you're a voracious learner. Like you're listening and you're taking cues from what you see out in the market. When you test these concepts on your own business, because it's hard to scale the businesses that we're in, like literally that we're in. How do you like, are you pressure testing what you're learning on the outside on your own business as you go through it and iterating? Or like, did you have a problem scaling? Or you're like, no, here's why.
Oh, so our number one core value is practice what we preach. It is so hard for coaching and consulting firms, right?
Yeah, totally.
To eat their own dog food, as they say. So we constantly have to remind ourselves that if we're not doing it ourselves, like people say, hey, you should have 3 brand promises. Well, what are yours? You should have a purpose. Well, what is yours? What are your core values? What are yours? What's your BHAG? And so I get asked that question enough that I have them, because I don't want to not have an answer. But it's always hard to scale, and it's hard for you to see it. So that's why there's really 2 important routines. And it's the number one thing that we teach a CEO. And that is what Jim Collins taught me. When I cornered Jim, he's right here in Boulder, Colorado as well. I go, Jim, all right, you have studied greatness for 25 years, mainly with Fortune 500 companies. What is the one thing that you learned that was most important, you think, for us mere mortal scale-ups? And he didn't hesitate. He said, the counsel. And that's on pages 114 to 116 in Good to Great. And that is, you got to work on strategy every week. You can't just do it once a quarter or once a year. And so you need to set aside an hour where you're with a handful of people you highly respect generally inside the company, that can challenge you, that can counsel you. So mine's at 9 a.m. every Monday. It's the 3 CEOs that run our 3 major companies and myself. There's the 4 of us. And that's where we put issues on the table. We run the CEO Summit at Harvard. We tried a whole different approach this August. Man, we messed some things up. There were some things that worked really well. I really needed their feedback, their counsel, so that we're announcing this week a whole new version of that CEO Summit at Harvard. So you can't see it yourself. You've got to have outside counsel to do it. So that to me is the most important routine.
Do you mind sharing like one blind spot that you had that maybe in that meeting popped? You're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I missed that in the moment.
You mean about this latest decision on the CEO boot camp? Or
Yeah.
The biggest one was, so when I launched the company in 97, we went from $500,000 to $1 million to $2 million to $4 million, getting ready to go to $8 million. I'm going to be an Inc. 500 company, and I'm raising $10 million to go do an acquisition. And all of those I was trying to raise the money from kept telling me the same thing. Verne, you have an unworkable model. You're at 42% gross margin. You need to be at 55. Now, I had such hubris. I'm the scale up guru, that I ignored their advice until I got slapped silly right after 9/11, lost $1 million in about 8 weeks. And I'd been losing money dutifully because that's what you did in the late 90s, right?
Mm.
That's what you're supposed to do if you're scaling a company then. And I was broke. And I got religion and realized that my focus for 2002 was I'm not going to be in this business if I don't figure out how to be at 55% gross margin instead of 42. So it was my failure to listen to those around me who really did know better than me. And I paid the price.
Well, it's hard to like, ivory tower syndrome is real for any leader, right? Why, how did this happen to us? And like, what is the perfect sort of, I call them raft mates. There's only so many spots on the raft. Too many people will sink the raft. In your opinion, is there a perfect number? And I've heard for teams is another thing, like the pizza test that Amazon Bezos has, how many people on the team can eat a pizza? That's the amount of people that should be on the job. But what is the perfect, you're going to surround yourself with a group of people, of trusted allies. What is that number?
No, Bezos was right. It's the 2 pizza test. And the research is clear. It's 4 to 5 people. That's why special forces are 5 people, not 8 or 9 or 10. Ant colonies are organized in 3 ant teams with a team lead. There's a reason. So for me, look, when Steve Jobs took over Apple, he said a small team of A+ players can outperform a massive team of B and C players. What people don't know is it was precisely 5. He chose 5 people. One of them was Johnny Ive. And then he chose somebody to lead the personal desktop, someone to lead the personal laptop, somebody to lead the business desktop, and somebody lead the business laptop. Those 5, plus Steve, are the ones that met every day in his conference room to turn Apple around. So it's 4 or 5, what 2 pizzas can feed.
So it's so weird. The words turnaround keep coming up.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's never been, this is probably the wrong word. What I'm trying to get to, I was going to say never been easier, but I've now seen the power of people, of really good leaders, turn around businesses faster than I've ever seen. Or look at sports teams. Like it's 1 second, the sports team is 3-13, and then, oh my goodness, here they come. Are you seeing that too? Like the speed to turn around is faster than ever? And is it because, or are you seeing something different?
First of all, it's a great question. I had never thought about the speed. So we know a couple of things. First of all, to me, the guru of turnarounds is Greg Brenneman. And Greg wrote a book called Right Away and All at Once. And his favorite Harvard business, the famous Harvard Business Review article by the same name. And he details, but in some sense, you've got to do it quick or it's over, you
Yeah.
know? And the key is this, and I use the example of, I don't know, what are we on? Ocean's 47? I don't know which movie we're on, right?
Right.
But it's the same plot, which is let's get the old gang back together and let's figure out which bank we can rob next. And those that are most successful, whether they're serial entrepreneurs or serial around turnaround, is they tend to bring their team with them. And that's what Noam Wasserman found in his research at Harvard, that it even applies to startups, companies that start with what he called an intact team. And here's what I recommend to college students. You want to start a company? Do what Steve Jobs did. Go first work for a big company. Hewlett Packard. He got an internship and then was at Hewlett Packard. When you're there, meet a few people that you share. My dad and his three buddies at Martin Marietta, the four of them left together and launched a company called Higher Electronics. They were a rocket ship because you had a chance to do the forming, storming, norming already, and you had four people that could divide up the duties day one. What Ed Roberts, the late Ed Roberts, whose memorial's coming up like next week, the senior faculty member at the Sloan School, found in his research that co-founders scale faster than single. 3 scale faster than 2, 4 scale faster than 3, and 5 scale faster than 4. And if they work together at a previous company, their ability to launch and scale is so much further and faster. People forget Airbnb is launched and still led by 3 founders, co-founders. PayPal had 5, Reid Hoffman, Peter Thiel, and
any data on once it gets to 6 or 7 that it's actually diminishing?
Ed Robert, that's a great question because we just said an ideal team is 5. Ed said there wasn't enough data points after 5, but even Apple and Microsoft had co-founders. And when Brad Feld, who was one of my first students at that MIT program I launched for EO, in Techstars, he co-founded Techstars. You're not allowed to be part of Techstars if you don't have a co-founder. There's got to be at least 2 of you in order to be a part of that program. So I think the key to turning around fast is an intact team you've worked with before that can hit the ground running and are meeting daily to get it done.
This might be a little of a pivot. But I'm letting the audience get to know Verne, Verne Harnish, father of 4, and even before that, just Verne. Do you have personal values that are separate than your company's?
It was the Eyres, EYRES, that were kind of the family gurus for YPO. And they raised 9 children. And they were speakers on the YPO circuit. And I was lucky enough to hear them. And they were the ones that were adamant that you should have a weekly meeting, family meeting on Sunday, that you should have family core values. What are the rules of the family? And that in many cases, you should kind of run your family like you would any group of people. Because look, that's what a business is. Organizing a group of people to get stuff done, for other people. So yes.
But do you personally what are your personal values?
Oh, no, I don't. I wrote them down as part of a Tony Robbins thing. Here was what was more valuable. So I went to Tony Robbins, and by the way, I just had a chance to be on his stage a few Sundays ago. I closed for him on day 3 of his Business Mastery 2. What a fun, unbelievable. First of all,
I'm sure
so brilliant when it comes to business. I mean, he's the real deal. His Business Mastery 1, his Business Mastery 2 are rock solid. But I had a chance to go to his 5-day date with Destiny. And he asked a very powerful question. And he had us write down our personal values. So that's when I first defined them. And I have they're in the form of affirmations now. That's why I don't call them values. And I read them every morning, and I could share them if you want me to. But the more important question was, what are the things you value that aren't serving you? And it was like, wow.
Yeah.
No one had ever asked. And he has this really cool workbook where you answer these questions And then you read the sentence that it creates, and it's like, that's what's in my way. So I think an equally more important question are, what are some values you may have grown up with that you need to discard that are getting in your way? And that was most helpful to me.
No, I love that. And yeah, I think time is tricky, right? Like it's a finite
Yeah.
thing. Like, so you're even designing life where you're making choices in time. I've been at the courage game now for 7 years. It's continual improvement, continue the 1%, 1%. And in some ways, it like when you finally land on something, they're like, oh my, did that really take me 7 years to get to? But but that's okay. So like we're passionate about creating a platform of positivity and possibility. That's that's where all of our energy and joy is going. And I think it's a heavy world right now. I hear you on the politics thing. We're not going there. But my number one personal value is optimism, and I'm trying to work with people that see it's glass half full, not glass half empty. Personally, and then possibility, what's in your way? Where are you stuck? Where are you scared? Because change is not going to stop anytime soon. I think it's too audacious to say anyone can easify change, but helping you through the process of change and get to those possibilities is the business that we're in. I was just curious if you had done you call them affirmations. Is there one that pops for you that you're like, oh, this is really Verne?
Yes. And it's my last one. I said, I have a new P&L, peace and love.
I love
And
that.
and I think I would probably still be married. I was married for 28 years, and I think I would still be married if I had discerned that sooner. Because like a lot of entrepreneurs, we can get edgy and we can get nervous and we can get pushy. And that has not served me well, I discovered. It was one of those things that this change started with Tony's work. But ultimately that's the one. There's this new P&L, there's this new ROI. This one, I claim ownership of Peace and Love, the new P&L, Peace and Love.
Yeah.
But the other one I shamelessly stole, and that is there's a new ROI, ripples of impact.
I
And
like
so
that.
that's my new P&L and my new ROI. And that's the final affirmation I share.
When you close down Tony's event, so my just to give you the 1 minute on my story, my mentors were madmen in New York. Great, I was terrified of them, but like very grateful to go have that experience at the time. And then I moved to California to write movies, and I say I'd not live one. And I feel like I've been living a movie ever since. And when you study great classic stories, like every story ever told is the same, right? The hero of the story thinks the treasure is one thing and turns out to be something else. So I'm curious, when you went to, did you think you were going to Tony's thing to close down day 3 and then almost have like, oh, wait a minute, like I need to take in what he's saying, and suddenly you're coming up with, your P&L.
Well, remember, there were two different events. So I went to Day with Destiny about 5 years ago, 4 years, yeah, 5 years ago. I just like 2 weeks ago did the close for him on Business Mastery 2. But I will say, I went to really shamelessly steal how Tony ran his events. I've always admired his style and the quality of his events and the music and all of that. I didn't go thinking I was going to learn anything.
Yeah.
And I don't want to mention her name, but so I go with a friend of mine, and Tony said, hey, you shouldn't really do these exercises if you came with somebody. You should really turn to somebody. And I turn around, and it's this really sad looking woman. And I look down at her name tag, and she's like one of the most famous movie stars. You would know her name. And I go, what happened? And you get that honest in Tony's things. And she tells me, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I watched over the next 5 days her transform from the inside out. And she ended up being featured in People magazine the end of that week. Like, she announced to the world, I'm back after going through hell and back. And so not only did I see that real time, that quick,
Yeah, totally.
but I saw it with myself. And that's when I'm like, wow, Tony's the real deal. He doesn't need to do this. He doesn't need to be sacrificing his voice. He's got all the money anyone would ever need. He truly wants to make a difference, and that's impressive. So that's my personal testimonial for Tony.
My first thought is Greg Brenneman, right? Like right away, all
Yeah.
at once. Like it's like that's not about just business; that's about people too. Like,
Yeah,
do what you need to do, people, to get to like
Yeah.
look in the mirror and do the work on yourself. I'm curious for you, Vern. We're kind of coming down to the end here. You can't really. The more we study courage, the more we acknowledge this amazing relationship with fear. You know, and fear can be a motivator, like you're on a deadline, but fear can also drown you if you're not careful. Do you still have fear? Like, do you have fear and permission granted to go, like choose your own adventure, business or personal life? Like, do you still feel fear?
Oh my gosh. Well, so let me go back to Greg. I I had Greg come on to our first virtual summit when the pandemic hit. We were getting ready to do our standard, Bloomberg regular Fortune in-person summit when the pandemic shut us down. And Greg came on and said something very powerful. I've never forgotten. He said the job of a leader is to absorb fear and to exude hope. Say that again. Our job's to absorb fear and to exude hope. It's not fair, but that's what you signed up for. And if you're not ready to do that, then get out of the way. And so it's that ability to harness and channel that fear. So I'll tell you, I have never prepped more for a presentation than being on Tony's stage. I was scared shitless. I mean, this is a big stage. This is a guy I admire beyond belief. And I was scared, but I also know that if the day you're not scared, you're probably going to lose your edge. You've gotten too comfortable, right? You're not pushing the boundaries enough if you're not willing to say yes to things that are scary. So
I mean, obvious next follow up.
Yeah.
The second you're done from this, where you're like, I feel good about that. I nailed it. Like the minute you got through the speech, how'd you feel?
Oh, I really thought I nailed it. They acted like I nailed it. I mean, the proof will be if I get invited back. But maybe I then sent, they were kind enough to send me a recording of it. And I sent it to my speech coach. I still have a coach, a presentation coach. And we had our session yesterday, and he beat me up big time. Now, look, he said, I'm going to give you a 9.5.
It's great.
I'm going to give you a 9.58 out of 10, but you could have been a 9.85 out of 10. And here's what you need to do better. And it's like, and I know that. That's why I have a coach. That's why I suffer his abuse. And it's good. I enjoy it. And I learned so much again from him yesterday. I mean, the day you think you don't need a coach, every athlete, anyone who's achieved anything, you need a coach. And so Joel Weldon is my speech coach. And so you got to face those.
Awesome,
by the way,
man.
I've not had the courage to watch it myself.
I know. Well,
I got the link. I sent it to Joel. Joel's watched it. Joel gave me all the feedback yesterday for me to, what I need to work on if and when I get back on that stage. But I still can't watch it myself.
I get it, man. And but you have a process for feedback or feed forward, depending on who you're talking to, right? And I'll admit, I do a ton of keynotes, so I'll say I'm not a motivational speaker. I'm a conversational speaker. That is my style. But I don't like looking back at me doing like because it's not about me. Yes, I want to improve, and I also worry like, is this going to crush me? Something I sound like, oh, that's what I
Yeah, I
sound like,
know,
or
I
that's how my
know.
hands are, or us humans are funny, fickle creatures.
Oh,
Uh,
I know.
Vern, what a pleasure. Look, I always say if we're in someone's car right now, or they're on a walk and we're in their ear, and they've made a decision to stay with us for 45, 50 minutes. They're clearly invested in this topic. They're hopefully they're learning something. I've learned a ton just from listening to today. I've learned how much you like learning, to be honest, and how you are. That I think those are the right words, a voracious learner. For anyone that's listening, I kind of feel like we have two or three persona audiences. You've got leaders and CEOs, leaders slash CEO founder types that are doing the best they can. I think you also have like curious folks that are on their journey. They might be at mid tier, maybe they're on their way. They have high hopes for them. Maybe they want to start a business. And then you've just got like fresh out newbies, and maybe they've read your book in this case as well. How do you think we should end? Like when you think about your world and you think about the world of courage, what do you think is like the right last note to share? If there's one piece of feedback or advice you want to give them, what would it be?
I highlighted her TEDx talk last Friday, and it's Stacy Lauren. And she said, the title was something like The Key to Getting Anything Accomplished. And it came down to what we learned from Napoleon Hill, and it's at the heart of EO and YPO. And that is you've got to put together a mastermind. So if you want to write a book, you need to identify 3 or 4 other people that want to write a book, because it's probably not your friends and family that are going to encourage you. And you need to if you want to get involved in the music industry, you better find 4 or 5 other people in the music industry that you can hang out with. And so literally based on Stacy's TED Talk that I highlighted, I saw it Thursday, I highlighted it Friday, came out just last week. I called up 3 of my buddies, Sal, Bob, and John. And the 4 of us have committed to a common goal for each of us. And we literally exchanged emails yesterday to say, all right, we're all in. We're all going to support each other in accomplishing this common goal. So Napoleon Hill was right. You can't do it alone. You have to find 3 or 4 like-minded people. That's the power of that council every Monday. And that's the power of your daily huddle that Steve Jobs had with those other 5. It's what Nick and the boys, Nate and Brian and those guys have done at Airbnb. And that's what everyone on this call has, I think, in my experience, needs to do for whatever it is that you want to accomplish. You can't do it alone. Can't get sober alone. You can't do it alone.
And it can be really lonely when you're a leader. And these are just facts. It's just very lonely out there.
Well, that's why I founded EO. I had hosted the first public speech Steve Jobs ever gave after being fired from Apple. And he came over, and I had Michael Dell and Mark Cuban and all of those guys there. And Steve stayed for the after party. But Brian, he stood by himself in the corner until this gal from Chicago went over and asked him to dance, Joanne Marlowe. Got him on the dance floor. He's actually a pretty good dancer. And at that moment, I recalled my mentor, Joe Mancuso's line. It's okay to be independent, but no reason to be alone. And I said, I need to form an organization for the Steve Jobs. So that was really the formatting quote that really drove EO was it's okay to be independent, but no reason to be alone. And in the pandemic, I was so happy that there were 18,000 members who didn't have to go through the pandemic alone. They had their forum.
Listeners, this is a great place to end. My one question to you is, where do you need to be more courageous? And if you're not going there alone, who's going with you? And what are you going to do together? And Verne, Thank you so much for your time, man. Great to connect.
Yeah.
Enjoy the time in the States before you head back to Barcelona. I'm assuming you're a footy fan because you've dropped a couple metaphors.
FC Barcelona has been, and no doubt, Lionel Messi, greatest, player ever. He's the GOAT, and they're the GOAT company.
Thanks, Verne. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Courageous Podcast. If you enjoy the show, don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts so more people can find us. See you again next week.